gmail.com.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, no. Immorality generally.
Down the centuries you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour, and today I just want to celebrate the steady decline of marijuana prohibition, and more importantly, the steady decline of marijuana prohibition's talking points. There's just not too many that they can go to anymore. These latest numbers coming out of the Monitoring the Future study are the worst nightmare, just as bad as it could have possibly turned out for Kevin Sabet and the rest of the Project Sam acolytes out there, desperately trying to maintain some sort of criminal punishment for marijuana users. For a long time, they've been chanting about how legalization will be its own worst enemy, how legalization will unfold in Colorado and Washington and now Oregon and Alaska, and the consequences will be so devastating that the rest of America will wake up to this experiment gone awry and reject marijuana legalization on a national scale, and maybe even roll it back or repeal it in the places where it's already been tried. Well, that little fantasy is being shot to hell today by this pesky little thing called data. And the Monitoring the Future study today, one of the big talking points they've always had in prohibition is, what about the children? Oh my God, what about the children? It's okay if some adult wants to ruin their life by smoking pot, but by God, won't you think of the children? And the tacit assumption being that legalization of marijuana is going to make kids want to use marijuana more and give them more access to marijuana and make them think marijuana is no big deal. And what they're finding out, and what the numbers that I've covered in today's show tell you, is what kids are finding out about marijuana is the truth. And that is, as drugs go, marijuana is no big deal. And I mean that both from a public health standpoint of, it's not really going to hurt much, and also from the user experience side of it. Marijuana is no big deal. If you're a thrill-seeking kid, marijuana's kind of boring. Makes you kind of relaxed and sleepy in some cases, right? It's not exactly, the extreme, right, that kids are looking for. Sure, some are, many are, a lot are. It's a very popular drug. Look, don't get me wrong. And this is by no means an enticement for kids to want to try harder drugs, crazier drugs. That's not what I mean by this at all. What I mean by this, though, is that prohibition of marijuana has given marijuana for teens a much greater allure than it naturally has for teens. And I don't discount that a lot of teens, are in a bad circumstance. I mean, just being a teenager sucks. You're in the midst of hormonal changes and physical changes, and your brain's still developing, and you're in probably the worst part of the socialization that humans ever have to go through. The cruelties of high school and how those cliques can form and how people can be brutal. And then on top of that, maybe you're in a bad home situation or something. I can understand why some kids might want to smoke pot. But what I'm getting at here is that as a drug goes, the allure of marijuana was significantly increased through its prohibition. Without its prohibition, marijuana is just this flower that grows. Some people dry it and they eat it or smoke it or vaporize it, and Well, it makes them feel a little good and enhances sensory perceptions a bit. Maybe makes you want to take a nap. But with prohibition, it was the illegal, demon, dangerous drug that's going to lead to heroin. It's the gateway. It's so addictive. It's so powerful. It'll change and rewire your brain circuitry and turn it into a fried egg. And man, that sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? I mean, if you're a reckless teenager looking for cheap thrills, the prohibition of marijuana gave it a much greater allure than it would have had by itself. Oh, some flower my grandpa smokes that he used to smoke in Vietnam? Pfft, I don't want that. And that's what I think these numbers are telling us, is that kids, given the reality of marijuana, it's kind of mundane. So there's that. And then some of the ways they're trying to find a little nugget. They're just trying to find something to hang their hat on in these numbers. And I've been scouring their Twitter accounts and Facebooks and some of the news stories about this. And I found a couple. First of all, we got our friend Scott Gagnon. You know, I mean, he's out in Maine. He's with Project Sam in Maine, who is probably thrilled that he won our little bet. You know, I bet him that both the towns in Maine would pass legalization, and he was right. Lewiston did not pass legalization, so I have to give that to him. He was right. And Scott Gagnon is looking to the edibles stats. He points out, and I think he got this number from Kevin Sabet, that within these monitoring the future numbers, or maybe it's the NIH numbers, but within these most recent stats, 40% of kids in medical marijuana states that used marijuana, of the kids that used marijuana, 40% of them in the medical marijuana states used edibles versus 26% in the non-medical marijuana states that used edibles. And that's supposed to be a problem. That's supposed to be bad. And I'm confused because these guys are always hammering away at how awful smoked marijuana is. Well, marijuana doesn't need to be smoked. We don't smoke opium. And always excoriating the smoking aspect of marijuana. And so here we have edibles that reduces any of the harm that you would have had from smoking. And we're supposed to be terrified of that. Another one that they're trying to hang their hats on, Kevin Sabet. This is one that he's been using. And I saw this in one of his presentations when he was here in Oregon. Is that when you look at the sources for kids getting their marijuana, 30% of the kids in medical marijuana states got their pot via someone's medical marijuana card. Either their own or more likely like another adult's card or some friend's card. But from a medical marijuana card, they were able to get a hold of pot versus 8% of the kids in the non-medical marijuana states that got their pot via a medical marijuana card. And that's supposed to be somehow a scary statistic. But when you know more of that stat, he's framing it a little better now. But when he first debuted this stat, the way he debuted it is what were the top sources for a kid getting marijuana. And the total could be more than 100% because a kid could name more than one source that he got his pot, right? But the number one source in both medical and non-medical states where a kid gets his pot is from a friend. And the number two source is a gift from a friend, I should say, free from a friend, you know, smoking in a circle, right? So that's the number one source for kids in both medical and non-medical states. Number two source, bought it from a friend in medical and non-medical states. Number three source in the medical states, a dispensary from somebody's card. It came from medical marijuana somehow. Number three source in the non-medical states, a criminal, the criminal black market. So he doesn't frame it like that anymore because I pointed out in LeGrand, Kevin, doesn't your chart there tell us that between the medical and non-medical states, the only difference is that in the medical states, fewer kids get their weed from criminals? I kind of stuck that little talking point. But so now he's trying to reframe it. 30% of kids in medical states got pot via someone's card versus 8% in non-medical states. All that tells us is kids in non-medical states don't have anyone's card to get weed through. And so they're getting it from That's right, the black market. Some other signs that the end of prohibition is approaching even more rapidly than you might think. One of the things that is always frustrating to me is how we've legalized marijuana for medical use here in Oregon since 1998, and now we've just legalized recreational use. But for both, there's this prohibition on public display. The public can't see a marijuana plant growing. And for God's sake, they can't see you possessing it. They can't see you holding a bag of marijuana or, even worse, using it. And I've always thought, how stupid is that? And what's beautiful is that the new head of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission's marijuana division, Tom Burns, asked that same question. He said, quote, "If it's going to be legal, let's stop hiding it behind walls and doors," end quote. And here's a guy, he didn't know hardly anything about marijuana. He's a wine guy who's been touring dispensaries and talking to cannabis business owners and trying to understand what's going on here, and realizes that what's going on behind the frosted glass doors and the buzz through locked walls in these pot dispensaries is far, far classier thing that's going on than in a liquor store or your typical tobacco stand. And I'm not demeaning them so much. They're just retail businesses, that's no problem. But what I'm saying is, you go into a pot shop and man, it's nice counters and displays and, everything's wonderful in these places. So even the regulators now are starting to question, why does this need to be kept hidden? If it's legal, why should we keep it hidden? And part of Tom Burns' point was that we'd have more open and honest discussions about it if we weren't hiding it all the time. And that's a regulator talking here. I think we're in good shape as we move forward. I think the end of prohibition is near because I think the traditional opponents of it in the Republican Party are stuck. They're stuck right now. They can't come out too strongly against marijuana legalization or medical marijuana. They don't want to have that rift open up between their social conservatives who think drugs are bad and we need to come down hard on the druggies, the leftovers from the Nixon era, and the newer, younger Republicans, the Rand Paul types, who are very libertarian-minded with respect to states' rights in a federal system to be able to set their own marijuana policies. Even Kansas Senator Pat Roberts, who is older than dirt. It's been certified. It's been carbon dated. Pat Roberts even thinks that we shouldn't bug the other states if they want to try to legalize. He doesn't think it's cool for Kansas, but the other states should be free to try it. The Idaho Senate that voted 29-5 that marijuana shall always and forever in perpetuity be illegal for any and all purposes in the state of Idaho voted down a resolution that said the federal government should start kicking ass in Colorado and Washington. And again, it was that Idaho libertarian streak amongst their GOP that was saying, hey, we don't want to tell other states what their own business is. The legalization of marijuana is coming quickly. 2 states in 2012, we're up to 4 in 2014. We will be up to 8 in 2016. California, Arizona, Nevada, Maine, Massachusetts. If we don't get 4 out of 5 of those, I'll be shocked. I won't be shocked if we get 5 out of 5. Hey, that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio. We'll shoot the breeze on a few other stories out there. For everyone here at 420 Radio, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant